You're listening to I Heard It on the 806, a podcast by John Bowers. When God spoke to John about having a pastor's conference in Havana, Cuba, many said it would be impossible because of the government restrictions there. In spite of all of the fear and speculation, God opened the doors for the first pastor's conference to happen in Havana in 2004, with the leaders of all 39 denominations able to attend.
The year before, 2003, when all the Alliance leaders were meeting at the Marriott Hotel in New York for our yearly come-together time of playing, having a good time together, rejoicing together, the word of the Lord came for the following year to have the conference in Havana. Hector Hunter, Eliseo, Alejandro Nito were the three leading directors and pastors over all of the Cuban pastors. There's 39 denominational Cuban pastors, and if there's three people they'll listen to, would be these three just mentioned. So when I went the first time in 2003 to talk with Alejandro Nito, he says, "John, it's impossible for me, absolutely impossible for me to get a meeting with you with Fidel Castro's office and to meet with the people in charge of such a convention. It's never happened. It's not going to happen. It's a Christian convention. Can't happen." And I says, "Alejandro, would you just get me a meeting?" So I went home, came back to Oregon. He said, "I'll come back as soon as you think you have a meeting." He texts me just a few weeks later and says, "We've got a possible meeting. Come back. They're willing to talk with you." So that was many trips that I made back and forth in 2003 from Eugene, Oregon to Havana, Cuba, by way of Miami. So on this one day when I arrived, Alejandro Nito said, "I have called pastors. None of them are interested in meeting with you because if in fact you're meeting with Fidel Castro's people, then all the more this is the government scheme to get us arrested. So we're not interested." And I said, "Well, Alejandro, think about what God's going to do then. How's he going to do it? Show me." He says, "Well, if Hector Hunter would sign on and Eliseo would sign on, these are two of the Assembly of God leaders. Hector Hunter was the superintendent of the Assemblies of God in all of Cuba. If they would sign on, it would sure help me. Three would have more power than just myself." So I said, "Would you invite them over to your house tonight and let's meet?" So he did. Hector Hunter came with three of his leaders. Eliseo was there and Alejandro Nito came. And I shared the vision I had of putting on a Christian convention with all 39 denominational leaders, plus their leaders, plus the underground church leaders that these 39 denominational pastors sponsored. Hector Hunter looked at me and said, "John, I've never met you before, and your vision is an admirable vision, but at the same time, there is no way I'll support something like this because you can't tell me that God's telling you to work with Fidel Castro's compound and his leaders to put on a Christian convention. This is ridiculous. I can't sell it. I won't sell it." So Eliseo wasn't quite as abrupt as Hector and said, "Well, but what if it is God?" Hector looked at Alejandro Nito and he says, "Alejandro, do you believe that God would do something like this?" And Alejandro says, "Well, haven't we been praying for this for years and years and years? Could this be God's timing?" Hector shook his head back and forth. "There's no way this can happen." But he said, "Alejandro, Eliseo, if you're willing to go to jail for this, I'm willing to go to jail with you. The three of us have been there before. I'll throw my hat in. I'll support Pastor John's vision of having a Christian convention in Havana." So after many more trips back and forth, we finally got the invitation out to all 39 denominational leaders. I was called back to meet with all 39 leaders in Alejandro's church. Upon arriving, Alejandro said, "Well, no one has shown up yet. It doesn't mean they're not going to come in, all 39 at one time, but we've prepared a meal. Everything's ready. But John, I have a feeling they're not going to show up. So that night, when we met, there was Hector Hunter, Eliseo, Alejandro, and my interpreter and myself, and that was it. Nobody showed up. And they said, well, this is what you're up against. There will never be a Christian convention because the pastors don't trust the government. I said, okay, let's do this. We have to go to their houses. We can't just send a runner out telling people to come. We got to go invite them, knock on each door from Holguin to Santa Clara to Camagüey to Havana, from one end of the island to the other. We need to go personally invite them. Alejandro, bless his heart, said, John, I'll do it. So Alejandro spent 3 days driving from Havana all the way to Holguin and back, knocked on every door, made sure that all 39 denominational leaders knew that this was more than a possibility. They felt it was a move of God. So the next time I went in, 3 weeks later, to meet all 39 denominational leaders in Alejandro's church, they all showed up. All 39 with their wives. And so we had a banquet meal. I shared with them what I believe God had told me, and they had a committed time of saying, yes, we then are all in. We will invite our leaders, we'll invite underground pastors, and we'll come. How many can we bring? And I said 2,500. There was a ballroom in the Malaya Cuba Hotel that we could open up divisions in the walls, and portable walls could open up, and we could have 2,500 in the convention center. So I went back, now that we had the pastors behind me, and we met with the government officials 3 different times. First time was thrown out, ridiculed, mocked. How stupid do you think we are that we're going to let you have a Christian convention? Second time, not quite as bad. Third time, they said, okay, look, what we'll do is this. We will allow you to use the Malaya Cahiba Hotel Convention Center if you will only allow 1,500 to come, not 25. Well, I said, then fine, we'll take it. We'll do it. We shook hands on that. I went to Hector Hunter, Eliseo, and Alejandro and said, it's done. They've done it. They've agreed. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe it. But then with skepticism, they said, but John, are you sure this isn't a trap? I said, guys, God didn't send us from New York in the Marriott Hotel. He didn't send us with the message that we're going to have the conference next year in Havana with the idea that he's going to get us arrested. No, this is a God thing. Trust me. 2004 came. Everything was arranged. We show up at the Malaya Cahiba Hotel. 220 of the alliance leaders around the world came in, along with the pastors and the associate pastors and the underground church pastors. 1,800 people showed up, but they only allowed 1,500 in. So the ones they couldn't get in stood on the outside of the hotel with their hands on the hotel praying for what was going on inside. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we had 3 nights of absolute miracle meetings with Jesus, where there was worship, there was praise, there was open communion. We had foot washing. There was the most amazing banquet served on Saturday night that you could imagine in a public park. And the 1,500 were able to invite then, because it wasn't the hotel, they were able to invite the 1,800, and it was more like 2,000 that showed up for that great banquet meal, worshiping, rejoicing, praising God for such a miracle. And when that all happened and that all ended, the pastors formed their own alliance saying, if God can do this through one man's faith in America, then he can certainly do more through 39 men coming together in faith, believing for God for the next move of his Spirit.
You've been listening to the I Heard It on the 806 podcast with John Bowers. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing wherever you listen. To learn more about John Bowers, this podcast, and to find out how you can get a copy of his new book, I Heard It on the 806, go to ihearditonthe806.com. This has been an Avenue 153 production.